Good evening. I'd like to welcome my guest today, and I really, really appreciate so much him coming on the show, supporting me, coming on the show to tell about his story, which is an amazing, amazing story of redemption and the heartache he endured and what he's been through. So I'd like to introduce Leonard Rollock. Hi, Leonard.
Thank you. How you doing?
Hi. So, what I'd like to tell the audience is that in your younger years, I know in the 80s you got in trouble for a very serious crime and you did a lot of prison time. And how you came to know me is through Mark Ryder.
Right.
And Mark Ryder telling you about me.
Right.
What did he say?
He told me that he would appreciate if I listened to you, or that you was a good friend of his, and that you're trying to help.
Yes.
So I told him no problem.
So let me hear, I just want you to tell me about when you were younger and what you went through and through what your charges were and what the system, the federal system of the court system, how you came about of getting the time you did. Because what I looked up and what I read was that you could have gotten 15 years. And on top of that, you got a lot more.
Yeah. At that point, me couldn't get 15 years.
What were your charges?
Initially, my charges were just racketeering, being involved with drug sales. Basically, it was that conspiracy to sell drugs. But that offer came. I have a unique situation of growing up, being in the street, being friends with bosses, and getting caught up in cases. Guys that actually might have been around me, none of them never came to jail. I've usually been tied directly to a boss.
A boss of the Italian organized crime, or?
I mean, the guy that told in my last case, James Jackson, he specifically, he had his own case. But when he decided to tell, he couldn't tell on everybody who worked for him because they was telling on him.
Wow.
So he had to tell going up. And he had a connection to Mark, some kind of way, and he started telling on Mark. He tried to tell anybody else he could, and because I was somebody that he knew, that helped him, he put me in the mix.
Wow.
I'll say this to you. I got arrested with him because of somebody else.
You were pulled in.
Yes, I was pulled in. They assumed that I would be beneficial in the story. And I'm pretty sure the government knew that I didn't belong in the story. But I seemed to be very evasive to them. They obviously knew something about me, felt I needed to be questioned or apprehended some kind of way. And this guy was allowed to make up a bogus story that allowed him to come and arrest us and get us off the street.
Were you arrested on, like a charge?
I was arrested on I believe at that time it was just a drug conspiracy.
Okay. That was your first case?
No, it wasn't.
It wasn't your first case.
All right, my first case was with a gentleman called Nicky Bonds, who became, very famous, infamous informant. Before that, he was considered like a John Gotti, somebody that kept having cases and he kept beating his cases.
Okay.
They was calling him Mr. Untouchable.
Really?
Yes, in the 70s. I got arrested with him. There go Maryland. So I got arrested with him in 1976. When I was a kid, I couldn't get nobody to introduce me to him. As I got older, certain things happened. I came to his attention, and he started inviting me to parties and trying to have me around. So
you came up the ranks, you want to say, through Nicky Barnes?
Well, no. I came up the ranks because, they tried to make it look like Nicky Barnes ran the street, and really Harlem was like an area for a whole lot of people to come up out of financial poverty.
To try to better themselves?
Yes, it was just an area that was unique, probably to the world, where, its history goes back to entertainers and everybody coming to Harlem to party.
Exactly.
And that attraction meant that every other thing went along with it. So all kind, marijuana, people, if you look at the movies like Malcolm X, he was a number man that tried to provide any service that anybody else came to that part of the town to try to engage in. So he probably would help them buy drugs, help them find women, whatever it was. So that street availability, that hustle, never left, until recently maybe, because they changed Harlem.
Mm-hmm.
But that was what was unique about Harlem to any other place in the world.
A lot of tough guys came out of Harlem.
Yeah, I mean, tough guys come from wherever they at, but
Yeah.
I think the competition, the money, made it different from the other boroughs in the city. I remember speaking to an officer one time, and he was trying to tell me that they looked at crime on levels of sophistication, and that he felt that Harlem had the most sophisticated criminals. Then it might have been the Bronx.
Mm-hmm.
Then it might have been maybe Brooklyn.
Mm-hmm.
Brooklyn was there, but he measured the sophistication on the amount of money that was involved in the cases.
Yeah, you have to be smart to get out there and make the kind of money you guys were making.
Yeah, but I try to tell people that grew up in Harlem, don't look down on nobody that grew up in slower places. See, Harlem had an activity that we just happened to be in the right place at the right time.
Okay.
So, I mean, you had all the pimps, you had people from all over.
Right.
At one time, blacks from all over the world tried to come to Harlem because it was like a mecca for black people.
Really?
If you go back to 1938 and look at pictures, you'll see people with full-length raccoon coats and convertibles.
Wow.
There was no place you can do that in Africa, South America, in the Caribbean, or no place else in the country.
They made that film with Frank Lucas.
Yeah, that was a film they made that they was able to tie in history, but
American Gangster.
yeah, and there's an issue about that. When they finally got a chance to make that movie, you have some people that are a little bit more conscious that are concerned with the fact that not only was he an informant and they gave him a stage to make his own world, I mean, he twisted everything out and took a lot of other people's stories to perpetuate himself, but the fact that they took the movie and they called it The American Gangster for a black guy. And so, I guess with, some people that are a little bit more conscious, they might have a problem with that because they didn't put American in front of the Godfather. They didn't put American in front of Al Capone or nobody else.
Right.
As soon as we get
Good
there,
point.
it's the American. And so if Europeans and everybody's looking at us from afar, we become the stigma of what the gangster is.
Right.
I'm pretty sure, I mean, that's a
But that's a good point.
argument.
That's a good point.
Right.
I have not thought of that.
Hardly nobody's thinking of it.
Right.
We caught up in, the fascination of the movie world. And, you take stars that have these, they have a following, marquee names, they can sell anything, So Denzel did an excellent job, but the story was completely bogus. And he made himself look like he was the smart, suave guy, but if anybody looked at his history, somebody growing up in the South, coming up here at 6 or 7, only have a 36th grade education, all of a sudden he's going to be sophisticated enough to go to another country with another language, have no connection to the military, go up in the mountains, negotiate with these people, and then arrange something in the military to bring stuff back.
Interesting.
He comes to New York. I mean, come on. And then, I don't want to, belabor his issue because anybody that comes from farther back enough in history, they know that, he took great liberty and, getting the story out, and he was successful with it. And that's
So
what happens.
let me ask you this, Leonard, so as you're going through life and did you do a lot of federal time or was it state time?
I've had 2 sentences and they were federal.
They were both federal.
Yeah.
So what was the case that you could have gotten 15 years, but it wasn't put up? Like, did you feel like you got?
I want to start with the first case.
Go ahead.
The first case I was arrested in, it was one of the biggest cases of all, of recent history. And matter of fact, that case that I was in was the first case in history where we couldn't know. The jury was anonymous and they were sequestered. They were anonymous.
Wow.
We couldn't know their last names, their ethnic backgrounds, and really not too much where they came from.
But on that case, were there informants?
Yes, but the informants, it was crazy because none of them informants was part of the group.
Okay.
It was people on the
Hearsay.
outside trying to
Hearsay.
give their perspective of what was going on. And I think what gave the government a lot of traction in that case was that there was negative publicity about Nicky Barnes being on the front cover of a popular magazine where that caught the attention of Jimmy Carter.
But at that point, Nicky Barnes wasn't a government informer.
No, he wasn't a government. No, at that time, he probably had about 6 or 8 cases in the last 4 years.
Okay.
He might have came home in 1969,
Okay.
and then he went back to making crazy money, and he stayed in the public's eye because he kept getting arrested.
Okay.
I mean, they were on top of him. He's probably getting arrested with large amounts of money. He's got arrested with maybe for murder or for some other kind of activity, criminal activity. But he kept beating the cases. He had a very smart attorney named David Breitbart, who was a high-powered trial attorney. Mm-hmm. And so David kept challenging the government to, meet that guilt beyond reasonable doubt, which they were failing. That was in the state, though.
Okay.
And a lot of lawyers don't realize state court, you can have a whole bunch of wins, but when you get in a federal court, it's a different ballgame.
Mm-hmm. So with that case, so you feel, well, the facts are you were pulled into that case
Yes.
because of his negativity and what other people on the streets were saying, and then they were looking at you
Well, okay. So I was pulled into that case through association.
through association.
He liked me. He knew I was an up-and-coming fighter or whatever, and he was always trying to get me to train in some gym he had. I was
Okay.
on top of an after-hour spot, which, I couldn't do because there wasn't no traffic or sparring partners. I used to train in Gleason's gym in Midtown, which was, they called the Gym of Champions, and a lot of wannabe fighters and a lot of champions came there to train because there was a large selection of styles that would help you perfect yourself. You're beating up the same guy in the ring, you're not really getting no better.
Yeah.
So Gleason's gym was the place to be, and that's where I used to be downtown by the Garden. I also was when it was in the Bronx. But so Nick, like I said, he liked me. He took notice of me, and he just started sending girls and asking me to come to his parties. So
would you say Nicky Barnes back then was like the John Gotti of?
he definitely was the John guy.
Okay,
Definitely.
Okay.
I mean, let me put it this way. Just like, John Gotti being a highly respected notoriety, we also know that there's a lot of guys on his level that stayed behind the scenes. They wasn't
yes.
trying to get no attention. And that's
Exactly.
traditionally was how mobsters or people in the street used to be. So when you talk about John Gotti's fame, infamy, and his power, we also know there was people that never was talked about because they kept themselves out the way. And that's the same way in Harlem.
Yeah, and they don't want to be talked
That's
about.
right. And there's definitely a bunch of guys in Harlem that was quiet and businesslike, and they liked it like that.
Yeah, because
So-
it's better for them.
That's right. So, I just wanted to clarify that Nick, yeah, he was like the John Gotti.
So he was like the John Gotti. So you're coming up. He likes you. He pulls you in. You start working with him.
No, I didn't start working with him.
You didn't.
No. He pulls me in, and all we do is kind of hang out. I come to his parties. I dance, I eat. A couple of times we went to a fight together. I used to get, ringside tickets for like the Ali fight at the at Yankee Stadium. That was one particular fight we went together. So my association, because he was heavily being watched, they feel like he's arrogant, like you in my face, you still here.
Wow.
So he calls me. I'll say, I don't want to say enamored, but I was definitely highly.
So you respected him?
Yes, I had a lot of respect for him because, when you come out of a impoverished neighborhood, the average family is struggling,
Absolutely.
and they're having all kind of problems, and it seems like the only people that have answer to those problems are the people that's in the street. They look good, when you got a problem, they usually can help you.
And it's quick money.
It's quick money. Even if we don't know how they're getting their money, they look good, they look new, and when you have a problem, they'll go straighten it for you, whether it's got to talk to somebody or pay a bill.
Yeah.
So, you know, to a lot of young men that don't have too many other role models, and if they don't have, you know, strong parents in the house, you know, enforcing something else, that's going to be your role model.
Right.
You know, and so basically, you know, Nicky Barnes was like that to me, among other people. But he started taking notice, started inviting me, and I started coming around him, and it cost me in the end.
It cost you in the
But
end.
I want to say this to you: I'm not the only one. That first case that he got arrested on, the investigation was so poor that out of maybe 15 of us that got arrested, 14 of us that got arrested, 3 of them were women. They had to cut them off. Back then they used to do that. And 2 other guys, you know, they wound up getting acquitted. And at least 7 of the other 9, they were all doing something else. They were not working with him. The government was so desperate to get him off the street that they needed people that was active in there, and what they did was get the outside so-called informants that really wasn't down with nobody to say that the other guys couldn't do nothing in Harlem unless he sanctioned it.
Right.
And they needed people that looked like they was getting money, the people that was getting money, to dress him up because they wanted to make him the biggest drug dealer in the United States.
Well, he had a big name, Nicky Barnes. People hear
He had a
about
big
Nicky
name.
Barnes. Right. As you said, it was like the John Gotti.
Right. So, you know, we all went to trial, and it was a crazy experience. Anybody that went to that trial or took note, they would have thought that we easily was winning the case. You know, our lawyers was making clowns out of the witnesses, out of also the agents.
Wow.
It was a laughing joke, and we just thought, you know, they did an excellent job. And the day that the jury came back, I remember seeing, as soon as I seen them coming out, I said, "Oh, something's wrong," and I seen someone look like they were crying. So I knew that it wasn't going to be good.
Good.
And the judge, the reason I got out early, see, and some of that might not have been helpful for me. I knew I didn't belong in that case. The judge, at my sentencing, he told me, "I believe you were selling drugs, but I don't see you part of this organization." And he named, you know, like they had things that guys did. They might have all filed miscellaneous tax and claimed to be big-time gamblers. They might have all bought cars from one dealer, and they might have parked their cars in the same garage. And I wasn't part of none of that. And it was nowhere. If you look at the Nicky Barnes case and they show you the board, and they have what they call the organization, I'm not on the board. In court, they was trying to find a way to stick me, but they didn't know. They didn't have nobody that I was getting nothing from or giving anything to. So they stuck me on the side to Nick. And you know, and that case kind of labeled me.
Wow.
Now, this is what I wanted to say. You know, Judge Henry Worker was considered a very strict judge. And what I have to remember is that he treated me fair. What happened was I had 2 charges, one conspiracy and one for selling drugs. He said he believed I was a drug dealer, but nowhere did he see I was guilty of conspiracy, even though the jury found me guilty on both charges. So what did he do? He ran my 2 15-year sentences together, so I only had one.
Concurrent.
Right. Where everybody else got theirs running separate, so they all had 30 years. The only other guy that had 15 like me was the number 2 man who didn't do nothing but try to wash some money.
He got 15 years.
He got 15 years. So me and a brother named Jazz, Joseph Hayden, got 15. And there was a couple of smaller guys like, you know, somebody's brother, and, you know, but they were really on.
But 15 years is still a long time.
And you know what? But we got to put this in perspective. Under the old law, if you got 15 years and it was your first time, ask for parole in 90 days.
Really?
Yeah, you wasn't gonna have to do no more than 1/30 a time if you was messing up. So that means that, you know, if you really was considered a bad person, the parole department would probably make you do 5 years. Now, of course they had a thing called Section 8, which they could extend you And that's what happened to Jazz. They extended him. He wound up doing 9 years. But I also think that if you had any kind of infractions, they used that against you.
What did you do on that case? How many years?
I did like 54 months,
Okay.
And, the only way I said that, I did 48 months in prison and did 6 months in the halfway house.
Okay. So you come out.
Yeah, I came out.
You come out. What happens then?
Well, I came out to fight. I trained the whole time.
How old were you at this point?
I was old. I was 31 years old.
Okay, but that's still pretty good.
Well, definitely I was in great shape. I had guys like Roberto Duran, Aaron Pryor.
You're in great shape now.
Well, I don't know about that.
You're in great shape now.
But I had some world champions that I was close to because we all had the same trainer. Uh-huh. And he encouraged them to stand, to keep me motivated, keep me training. So I stayed in touch with a lot of guys, and I came home ready to try to slide right back into fighting as a pro, because before I was an amateur. But I was sparring with pros for fights, whatever. So the parole department at the time, because Don King was in the news, being charged with, criminal accusations, and even though all his charges at the time probably was civil. But my parole officer took the liberty to say he wanted me to stay away from boxing. He felt like boxing and organized crime was too close.
Really?
And he wanted me to go get an office job, someplace, where I could be, he didn't want me driving no cab or nothing. He wanted me to be stable. So that definitely, because the clock is running against me, at that age, I kind of fell back. I stayed close to boxing, but I fell back. And, I wound up getting hooked up with like a record label and trying to do some independent producing at the time. So I have this case now that gives me a prior. And it gave me notoriety as being on this case with a lot of people that don't know the inside of the case. And then years later, through some other friends and associates, I get pulled into a case through somebody else making up a story. See, I guess, when you come from these big cases, you become like
an easy target.
Yeah, because I would be driving my car in Harlem. Once they find out who I was, they want to hold me longer. Yeah. They want to do all kind of stuff. Yeah. They're looking for cars. And even though I had like a daughter lived in the area, I was going to be, I think officers arrest somebody that's been arrested before.
Of course.
They can beat their chests on it, and it's easy to get the people to believe this guy's doing
because I think what happens is that there's such a around that with a person that has been arrested, a felon, they automatically feel they're repeated offenders,
right.
And they don't give them a chance to understand that people can change. And I think that's really, when I read about your story and then I spoke with Mark Ryder about your story, I really was like, God, this guy needs to tell his story because, like, where you're at today and the change that you've made in your life and how someone like you can be a role model to speak to the younger people and help them to understand that the way, I know a lot of, people think that the way of the streets is an easy way of life because it's a quick way of life and it's a fast way of life and the money's easy, but it's the harder way.
I guess what doesn't come across with that end about it being a harder way is that there's not a bunch of other ways being offered.
Exactly.
Everybody else seems to be working hard. Like my father, I had a father at home, so I'm not like a lot of guys didn't have a dad, but I didn't like my father's struggle. Mm-hmm. It's almost like that movie, Bronx Tale.
Okay.
The guy's looking at his daddy, looking at the slick guys, and they become more attractive, than somebody that's just
working hard.
Right. So that's a problem all the time in the hood, or in anybody's hood.
Right. So the second case you get convicted, was that a RICO?
Yes, that was the RICO organized crime, and that was the one that you heard that I didn't want to cop out to no 15 years.
Okay, that was the case.
So the reason.
Okay.
I didn't belong in the case.
Okay.
I'm looking at the evidence. The evidence is all against the guy that became the informant.
Oh.
It's all his crew. I don't have nothing to do with them. But I did try to help him. One time he came home and he needed some help, and I had a couple dollars, so I gave his friends money to bail him out. You know, I might have gave him money to get an apartment. You know, I tried to help him because I knew him from before, and he asked me for help. And I'm the kind of person, if I can help you, I will.
That's nice.
So at the time that we got busted and I was coming into the prison for co-defendant meetings, because a lot of these guys, they wasn't prepared. They didn't have no lawyers. They didn't have money for bail. And when I came in and I seen the chaos, you know, I was trying to find out what was going on, and I was trying to stop them from fighting amongst each other. But in that conversation and me questioning guys, they came to me with the issue that, well, he did. The one that told on me, James Jackson, was that he was considered the boss, and they would let him cop out to 45 years, which he was willing to do, but they wanted me to cop out to 15. And I'm saying, you know, I don't belong in the case.
Right.
I'm not going to cop out to something I didn't do. I'm going to fight him. You know, so at that time, what they call that is a global plea. A global plea is when the government will come and try to get everybody to cop out, but everybody got to cop out in order to get these numbers.
Oh.
And I was the one standout. So that messed that up. And, you know, eventually Jack decided to flip, and he got Mark involved. And
Is that
his name was James Jackson.
James Jackson? Yes,
Right.
he was on the case. So he was the first one that decided to, because I know he cooperated
Yes.
on Mark Ryder. But when did Nicky Barnes, was it at that time frame he cooperated too?
Okay, so let me say, around the time that I was released on parole, that's when there was some other problems coming up where, we had just lost a hearing in the Second Circuit because we had an argument that was unique. Never before was a jury allowed to be unknown to the defendants. Nothing about them. So this is an unanimous jury. And so we took that issue, you know, to the Supreme Court. It went to the Second Circuit. I think it got split. I think when something gets split, nobody wins. So the law stays the way it is. And when they went to the Supreme Court, I believe we lost like a 5-4 decision there.
Okay.
That just caused a problem with having a prior
For you.
for me, and then through my association, I got pulled into another case because, you know, if you don't leave your neighborhood, your friends are your friends from your kids. So even though they might be doing something, you know, just because y'all go have drinks together, that don't mean you're doing something. And in this case with Nick's family, you know, I was close to his nephew, along with other people. And so, you know, when Jack and them started having problems, like they came to me for money or whatever, and I was able to help. That story is, all of that is something they learned after Jack started telling.
When he started cooperating.
Right.
So you get pulled into, now you're pulled into this.
Right.
So with that, how much time did you actually do in federal prison?
Let me explain. I went to trial with them, and, you know, I jumped bail.
You
So
did.
just, you know, Mark jumped bail,
Mark
I jumped bail. All right, so what happens is I'm going.
You just skipped.
Yeah, I knew how to stay out the way. So
How long were you before they?
I was just, listen, I knew I wasn't going to stay away forever, but on the first case with Nick, I'm meeting guys that was on big cases, a lot of Italian guys, and I said, how come you only got 5 years? He said, well, I went on a lamb. He said, I come back after everybody convicted. They don't want to over the case no more, so they'll give me easy cop-out. So I said, that's just staying
So
in my
then you
mind.
want to do that? Yes.
Well, when I seen the chaos on a visit in the MCC, everybody was accusing everybody of going to see what the government wanted to talk about. Okay. And I knew that these guys were so desperate that maybe one of them would compromise themselves and use me, because the government is going to be saying, well, what about this guy?
Exactly.
So I couldn't trust that situation. So I needed to get out of the way, because I wanted to get out of the way and try to have the trial by myself, which, eventually I did. But that's what happened. I jumped bail. Mark and them went to trial. I got caught, or I came back to New York right after that. and I caught it. I got arrested. But the judge was so mad at me, and the prosecution was so mad at me that they just arrested me and then sentenced me.
You. And what was the sentence?
They gave me 2 50-year sentences.
250.
No, 2 50 years.
250.
I got
so 250-year sentences.
Yeah. The reason why I got the 2 50-year sentences was, first of all, I was a repeat offender.
Okay.
So under 851, they could double your time.
Right.
So everybody, most of everybody else was getting 50 years. And my other co-defendants got 50. One guy got 25. He didn't really belong in the case. He came from Connecticut. And Mark is the only one that got blown out the water.
Crazy.
He got more time than everybody.
Even now, all his co-defendants are out, and he's still in.
I know. It was ridiculous. For some reason, somebody's highly upset with Mark, and he's really a good person. And especially, after all the time he's done, you don't fake being a nice person for 20, 30 years.
No.
People change. Whoever was, if you're some way, when you 10 years ago,
you grow.
You grow.
You
That's right.
grow.
You're going to read, you're being held still. You're off that bicycle of life, and you get a chance to start reevaluating.
And you realize, when you're in there, I speak to a lot of people that did a lot of prison time, like him, even going up there. I visited him this year several times, and you see the growth, the change, the maturity.
Yes.
The maturity. 30 years itself is life. I think he's in 35, 34.
Yeah.
It's a long time.
And that, you know what? That's an argument.
The man is 74, 75 years old. What do you think he's going to do?
Now listen to the legal aspect of this. Mark gets arrested in September 87. The new law doesn't kick into November 1st, 87. So he has an old law sentence.
He has old law sentence, right?
Right. So, like you said, old law, they didn't have life without possibility of parole.
Right.
They had 30 years. They did have a change in the law, an enhancement of the law in 1986. And in 1986, they did. All right, so Mark got busted before 1986. 1986, they did add the words life without the possibility of parole. A lot of people assume that the first 848 sentence is automatic life without the possibility of parole, but it was no without the possibility of parole. Herbie Spelling, who was also a very highly acclaimed criminal, he was one of the first 848s. And once I looked over his record, he's one of the first guys that should got released. He caught his 848 in 1973. He had a very flimsy part of his case where, they had to have a continuing series of 3 other, drug deals.
So let me ask you this question. So you got sentenced to 2 50-year sentences.
Right.
How does that work? How much time did you actually have to do?
Well, I overturned that sentence.
How? Explain.
Okay, so this is what happened. When I'm coming and looking at all of the confusion and accusations, and I told you I needed to get out the way, Jack was with his lawyer trying to tell me that I needed to cop out. First, he told me a good friend of mine named Mike Romero was busted in D.C., was going to tell on me. That was something I didn't believe. So what happens is Jack, what happens is he goes and tells the government some other things on me. So they give me some murders. And
they charge you with that.
But they never got a chance to do that. That's what happened after that meeting. See, after that meeting, I decided to get out the way. After that meeting, he went and told them and gave me murders and extra drug charges and all this stuff. And they never got a chance to indict me. They don't indict you. There's no clock running on you.
Right.
So they put my picture in the chair with Mark and a couple of other co-defendants and took me to trial. Anyway, made my lawyer stay. And they had like a 4.5-month trial. And because I wasn't there, the government didn't even have to really dig up a case for me. Listen, he's not here. That's proof that he must be guilty. Why did he run? Whenever you come before a judge in a courtroom, the judge has to make sure you understand the charges. And he asks you, how do you plead? And he never got a chance to ask me about those charges on how do I plead. He only asked me about the first charges I got arrested with. So I got convicted on all those charges, the new ones.
Wow.
So that made the trial constitutionally violative. You know, they couldn't uphold my conviction with that. And with some case law that came down right before, I had a very intelligent, very tedious researching type of attorney. You know, he was a very smart brother. Excuse my language.
No, that's fine.
And he was like dead set on getting the case overturned. And right near the end, I found a case that just kind of locked it in. And so when we went to appeal, you know, my case was overturned. I was the only one that got my case overturned. And I went back for another trial. So.
That's got to be so stressful.
Yes, it's stressful. But, you know, coming up on our side of the fence, we used to being given a short end of the stick. And there's certain men that are going to kind of like be defiant and trying to fight that disadvantage. They're not going to fold, you know, and I happen to be one of them. I have a spirit where I don't like to be punked or whatever you want to call it. I can deal with my consequences when I make my decisions. I can look in the mirror, and I just felt like right is right, and I'm not gonna bend to somebody else's will to say I did something I didn't do.
Let me ask you this question, because there's, you know, at that time frame when they were giving out so much time, these life sentences due to the RICO. Okay, when you get hit with a RICO, people were getting hit with, you know, life sentences, like you're saying, 250-year sentences, and that's basically a lot of people at that time frame decided to cooperate to help themselves.
Right.
What do you think about that?
I think that a lot of people get into a life without considering the circumstances. They want to party, they like the glitter, and they never think about consequences. And I think real men will look at their consequences and make a real decision. And they're going to be able to look in the mirror no matter what happens. They're going to be able to stand by what they felt was right or what they felt they was going to commit themselves to.
Like, I feel I never like to judge anyone because until you're in that person's shoes, you cannot judge.
Right.
And I think that, you know, I have friends that have done a lot of prison time, as we both know. And then I have people that I know that were very close to me that cooperated.
Right.
And until you're standing in that person's shoes, you don't know. One thing I do know, because I was in the streets from when I was a kid, there is no loyalty.
Right.
When push comes to shove, everybody's fending for themselves.
Well, we'll say this, for some people.
For some
Or
people.
maybe for a lot of people.
For a lot of people.
But, you know, for some people.
But far and few.
Right.
There are far and few, like you're saying, real stand-up men.
Right.
Like a John Gotti.
Right.
Like you.
Right.
Like a Mark Ryder.
Right.
Like a Gene Gotti.
Right.
Like a Johnny Cornelia.
Right.
These guys, would you call them men's men?
That's right. That's a very proper definition, a man's man.
A man's man.
And all it means is that, you know, I think anybody that is dealing with a consequence and needs and have associates, that's the only kind of person you want to stand next to you. You know, that goes from the President of the United States to the military.
So I would like you to tell the audience, because then we'll have to close out, what would you say today from your life experience? We know you did federal prison time. We know, you know, what you were facing. We know what you fought. We know what you were up against. You had, you know, very well government informers like Nicky Barnes, like, you know, James Jackson, you know, cooperating on you. What would you say? I would like you to tell the audience.
All right,
for young upcoming gangs, young guys.
I want to say, first of all, that I had another trial. And in that another trial, I got sentenced to 150 years. All right, so now to go back to talking to people that committed themselves to the street and then found themselves being overwhelmed. You know, the bottom line is that you need to pay attention to everything you do. I guess most kids need to learn how to play chess or something so they could be kind of like considerate about every move they make. I think the advantages I had are the advantages the young kids don't have. When you go back in time, the neighborhoods were more tight, and you had elders in the neighborhood that would instruct you or give you some guidance. So that in Harlem and a lot of places in New York City, that disintegrated. The community, the family broke down, and the community broke down. So now you got young kids raising each other with no wisdom, no sense of direction, and then they're being led by the Pied Piper to the music, and maybe the video games where they're shooting up everything, and they're not thinking. So the structure of thinking and being responsible, that was completely taken. And people started appearing to be smarter than another guy if they're willing to start telling and getting out of it. A lot of people get into something and they never think about the consequences. And that is probably a crime in itself. That's one of the first violations. You don't get in the game, you don't know the rules. So all of that, made the street, that glitter of the street air kind of dissipated. And right now you got the rappers perpetuating it, and you got a whole lot of people trying to be like the rappers. The music is crazy. Music is very powerful.
Especially in those communities where...
Yeah, the people that go with the music, I'm listening to it the other day, and the guy's talking about who you kill, what to do, all of this stuff, and he ain't doing nothing. It's like being James Cagney. I'm really an actor, and and you're looking at it and you're seeing him, I'm ready, jump off the wall, whatever. So you're looking at the mobsters in the movies, and you're hypnotizing yourself into that.
And they're following along.
And then they're waking up in the prison.
Yeah, I mean, I know because, like, where I live in Pennsylvania, but Philadelphia is really struggling. We're struggling really bad in Philadelphia with a lot of murders, every night murders in these, poverty-stricken neighborhoods. And these young kids, I put the news on in the morning, I'm talking 14, 15 years old. They don't even know what they're doing, out shooting guns, shooting each other. That's really, really sad. It's sad because they don't even know. They're emulating. They see maybe the 28-year-old drug dealer, polished the new car, or like you're saying, listening to the music and wanting to get out there. And before you know it, they're either laying on a slab or they're facing 20 years.
I've told judges, when I've seen prosecutors talk about these guys being reckless and dangerous, and I would tell a judge, at sentencing that a lot of these guys, they don't see themselves having a future. They don't see themselves reaching 30 and 40. They're out there reckless because
that's very sad.
They don't have that vision. Their rap stars talk about their own demises.
Right.
So they think that's part of their existence, and they don't really. It's crazy for somebody to think that at 20, if you see somebody 39, he's an old person.
Now, with the last case that you said, did you beat that case? The case with the 100 and...
No, but I was able to get out. Everything you're not going to win in court, and in the feds, you need some connection to politics. And I was fortunate enough to hire a person that was the former chief of. He was the former chairman of the Parole Commission. Wow. Okay. All right.
Former Parole Commission.
Yeah,
okay.
So he's seen some improprieties in my record.
Okay.
How people were dead set on trying to keep me in prison, and he's seen inconsistency in me. He knew I went back and got acquitted of some charges in that trial. Mm-hmm. I got acquitted of the murders, but the Parole Commission kept my first pre-sentence report and said, well, this guy never went home. So if he never went home, we don't need to change his pre-sentence report. But the pre-sentence report talks about what you're convicted of.
Right.
So for a while, the Parole Commission tried to ride with whatever the judge's intent was and keep him in.
So what are you doing today with yourself? What have you been doing with yourself?
All right. For the last 8 years, 8 years, I've been working with a top attorney who's in, he's exposed me and helped me to become seen viable by other attorneys. So I'm like
here in New York.
Here in New York. His name is Anthony Rico. He's a Fordham law professor, and he's one of the top death penalty attorneys and trial attorneys in the country.
Oh,
highly acclaimed. I mean, people in Harlem don't realize who they're around. You know, when I go downtown with him, all the judges and everybody seem to have utmost respect for his work ethic, and he's a master at what he does. So I've been around him. He's been showing me what they do now, which I basically know, you know. And he, I guess what I stay amazed at him because he handles so many things, and the way he runs through a trial, he doesn't need a book. You know, he's a master at what he does. You know, he's got like over 40 years as an attorney. So,
So what are you actually helping?
well, I've helped him with trial prep. I've helped him with attorney clients. You know, you got
Nice.
difficult, frustrated clients. I can talk to them. I always said to myself, and I wish I had somebody like me to talk to when I'm sitting in that cell.
Right, right.
You know,
That,
so
that's
I can
really
give them clearly what the lawyer's trying to convey that they're suspicious of, and maybe if there is some point there, then I can try to get the lawyer to understand.
I'm not going to say because I don't believe in luck. I really don't believe in luck. I think we make our destiny for me, but I do believe in someone upstairs really likes you. I believe the big guy upstairs has been watching over you.
There's like a saying that says that,
I believe you're blessed.
yes, I'm blessed. I'm blessed because I have good in my heart, and I think that preparation with opportunity is some people call that luck. But if I'm preparing for something good and don't know what it is, and I just stay on the grind, when things come, I'm going to be able to handle it.
Yes.
If I don't prepare for nothing, it'll come by and I won't be able to handle it and keep
Right.
going.
And you'll miss that chance. You'll
Right.
miss that opportunity.
Right. So the message is, you know, try to prepare yourself, and even though if you don't know what exactly you're going to be, but just try to be a better person and try to see how you can make yourself better every day.
And I believe too, it's always giving back, helping someone else.
Right.
You know, we develop into the person we're supposed to be by giving someone else a chance and by sending a message out that, you know, of positivity, that there's hope, there's always hope, and there's always, like, look at how the law's changed from when you were young.
When I first came home, because of a revolutionary prison I was around, that was Tupac's stepdaddy. His name was Mutulu Shakur. He came in. He explained to me that he was like a drug counselor, and he's one of the first Americans, among the first group of Americans that became a doctor in acupuncture.
Okay.
And his theory was the government's methadone was just another drug, and he wanted to apply acupuncture to wean these guys off of methadone and into complete submission of dealing with drugs. And I mean, he was using it for people to get off of cigarettes, people stop drinking, a lot of things. That was amazing.
So as we close out, what do you want to say to anybody?
Oh man, there's a lot. I would like to tell everybody that comes from our hood, all the young people, when they call you to trial duty, do not give up your spot. You tell everybody. You tell the judge, "Oh, my uncle's been arrested. My brother's been locked up." And these things, you say that you would be prejudiced to stay, and the judge allows you to leave. You need to be in that jury room to see what you could compare with your experience, so that you can make a better decision. Because the people that's making the decisions on us don't come from our neighborhood. We're supposed to be tried by a jury of our peers. And the worst thing we could do is have the people from our neighborhood think they slick by getting off of jury duty. And that's the strongest thing that you have. It's stronger than a vote. You can't lose your vote in somebody else's stuff. That jury duty, you could be the only one that feels that the government didn't prove their case, and the whole trial has to be started all over again. 11 people could be mad at you, and they can't do nothing about it. So we need to be in the jury room so we can stop. And you know what happens? When they start having them hung juries, it's going to make the government do their job. Because now they got to really bring the case. Otherwise, they just worry about flipping a couple of us and they get us in there, and everybody just assumes that the government must be right. Why are you in here? You need people that come from our neighborhood that know that a lot of people get arrested, and it ain't always what they say it is.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
Thank you for coming on. If you like this video, give us a thumbs up. Please subscribe to the channel. This was an amazing, amazing guest. A lot of knowledge. I've learned a lot from you. And thank you so much for coming on my show. Thumbs up. Please subscribe to the channel. Thank you.
Thank you. All right.
All right, take some pictures. Come in. Let
Yeah,
her get